Do you ever feel like your worth depends on applause, success, or being useful? Well, welcome to the security trap. In this episode, we unpack how people-pleasing and performance can masquerade as purpose, and how artists can break free from the need for validation to reconnect with true vocation.
Hello, welcome back to Be Make Do, a Soul Makers podcast, where we explore what it takes to live out your call in the arts with spiritual wholeness and creative freedom. I'm your host, Lisa Smith, here with my producer, Dan ABH.
Hello, everyone.
And it's our passion to encourage you to become who you were created to be, make what you were created to make, and do what you were created to do. So in our introduction episode, we unveiled the idea of what we call the vocation traps, those sneaky mindset detours that can derail your sense of purpose. Those traps we've labeled the security trap, where applause feels like purpose, the happiness trap, where chasing good vibes leaves you empty, the hero trap, where saving the world becomes your burden, the chosen trap, where doing big things for God can get you burned out. In this episode, we start our quest by examining the security trap and finding ways to help you get unstuck and experience a greater sense of freedom and your creative endeavors and your sense of call. Of course, we don't have it all figured out, but it's something that we've been exploring and working with for a long time. We are just artists and creatives just like you who've been on this path exploring these questions. These questions about vocation have been something that have been with me my whole life, and I've gotten stuck in every single one of these traps. So in my quest to kind of get myself unstuck, I've learned a lot of really great stuff and come across a lot of great materials, had really wonderful advice from friends and other artists, and also had the opportunity to work with creatives across disciplines as they're, struggling with their own version of the traps. So if you ever feel like you're trying to escape a twisted net of other people's expectations, you're going to want to listen closely to this episode. Let's get started.
Let's do it.
Okay, first things first, I want to be sure you take advantage of our Vocation Trap Tracker tool that we created so you can track along with us as we explore these vocation traps this season. It's a really cool, highly interactive tool that you download. There's spaces to color in, stuff like mind maps, places for journaling, all kinds of great exercises. There's something that happens when you just take a pen or some crayons or some markers and a piece of paper and just let yourself go. So it's a great tool to be able to process if any of these traps are getting you stuck, but also to figure out the ways to bust through so that you can find freedom. You can find the tracker and the workbook on our website at soulmakers.org/BeMakeDo, or you can find the link in the show notes. All right, so what is the security trap? Now, each of these traps, we're going to kick off with a question because I'm all about questions. And so these are the questions that we tend to ask ourselves without even thinking. And then I'm proposing that we kind of switch those questions up a little bit or switch them up for better questions. So the question that we find ourselves asking in the security trap is, what am I called to do for others? So now the security trap lures you in with promises of validation. It traps you when you begin to mistake that validation for purpose. Now we're going to go right back to that question. What am I called to do for others? Now that sounds actually really noble, because doesn't being focused on others make me a good person? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing, is serving others? But see, the trick of the security trap is that instead of staying focused on God, on what we're called to do, on doing the daily things, we're keeping one eye on other people's approval for the security of knowing that we're doing the right thing. So it's different than being about serving. It's about looking to others to make sure that I'm okay. Another way to say it is that Those of us who find ourselves overly concerned with getting it right or being good might find ourselves trapped in a net of other people's expectations and just getting tangled into a good old mess.
Yeah, you mentioned that the trap feels noble. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more of why artists in particular usually fall into this trap, because they really want to help out or serve or be a good person or something like that. Asking for a friend.
Right. So I'm not sure that this is necessarily particular to artists specifically, but I think it has more to do with personality type. But I do think as Christians, this can become a factor, or as people who are really motivated by helping others or doing things for others, because obviously within that framework, service is good. That is what we are called to. We're called to develop our gifts. We're called to develop our relationship with God and our identity with God. And then that needs to be outwardly focused to be able to serve other people. But where it becomes problematic, the difference is that we are looking for external validation. It's not really about the other person. We're looking to the other person to validate ourselves. We're taking our eyes off of God for identity and purpose. So yeah, I think this can apply to anybody, but I think it's important for artists to consider, because maybe we're not even necessarily aware or clued in that that's part of the factor for us. So, well, let's go into that then. How do we know if maybe you're in the security trap? So when you're making a decision about your career or what you're going to make or what you're going to focus on, do you ever find yourself stopping to wonder what's expected of you? Do you ever ask, what do other people say I should do? That might be a clue. Or when you get an idea for a creative project, are you ever tempted to fall back on the abilities that come easily and naturally instead of taking the time or spending the money to develop a new skill? Maybe you feel like you're ready to move to another level, or you need to add something in order to achieve the vision you have, but you kind of hold back because you don't know if you should spend the money to learn how to do that thing or spend the time to develop that skill. Or do you ever feel guilty about taking too much time in the studio just in general? Or like I said, buying new equipment that you need, or maybe feel guilty about being on tour instead of doing something that's more stable and has more of a stable income. Or here's another one. So this is putting this specifically into that Christian category. I do come across this, especially with younger artists, maybe who are just starting out or graduating from college, asking themselves, should I do music ministry or art ministry or drama ministry or something of the like, because there's a voice inside you that's telling you that would be more worthwhile than pursuing just music or art or drama or some other creative discipline. And so an outside the mold creative impulse is staying buried inside of you. Okay, here's one more. When you feel pressured by limited time, energy, or resources, do you lean toward what's sure to be rewarded with affirmation and security? Or do you find it difficult to make choices or risks that aren't a sure thing and may disappoint or let down others around you? You start to see kind of there's a little bit of a theme going on here. Obviously, considering others for whom we are genuinely responsible is important. I'm in no way saying that you shouldn't honor your commitments, but there are other voices that maybe we're sometimes looking to for security of approval, voices we aren't actually responsible for. So you have to ask if taking on a responsibility for meeting others' expectations might actually be a way to avoid taking responsibility for the care and development of your own gifts. And that's how you get stuck. It seems outwardly focused, but it's possible you're actually focused on serving others for your own needs, not in service to true calling. See, that's kind of a little insidious jump there.
Hey, Lisa, can I ask you something?
Absolutely.
Regarding those differences between genuine responsibilities and voices that you're not actually responsible for.
Right.
How can we, asking for a friend, discern between the two when making a massive decision, like a career change or creative changes or joining a different band or leaving another band or taking on a play, but you have all these other things and these voices in your head? Like, how do you discern?
Right, right. Well, so the differentiation between legitimate responsibilities, genuine responsibilities, and responsibilities that you're taking on from external sources is, when you're talking about genuine responsibilities, they're like people that are legitimately dependent on you, like children or spouse or somebody who is dependent on you that you've chosen to take care of, or the decisions that you will make will legitimately impact them in some way. And then you need to be thoughtful and considerate around that. That's one thing. Making decisions based on responsibilities that other people are putting on you, or you're actually taking on yourself based on ideas of success or fame or status or material success, or what it means to be a responsible person, what it means to be a grown up. I think these things, especially for artists, come in like as a freelancer. You are not going to have a steady income where you can say, this is how much I'm going to earn this year, and this is what this is going to look like. It's a big risk. So taking that risk, you need to take into consideration, are you going to be able to pay your bills? Are you going to be able to live up to the responsibilities that you have? But you don't have a responsibility to be a certain type of person. You don't have a responsibility to somebody to make a certain amount or live a certain way or your life to look a certain way. Does that make sense? Like it's not taking on these responsibilities that might come from, parental expectations or even peer expectations of, what it looks like to be successful. What it's about choosing your values. It goes back to everything we talk about, your values based on what motivates you, based on who God created you to be, and being faithful with that, as opposed to looking over to your neighbor and saying, you should be on tour all the time, or you should never go on tour, or you should, whatever that is. It's looking to external factors to make decisions about your values. Mm-hmm. And so it's looking in the wrong place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another thing that happens too for me is that I hear voices from so long ago that still creep up in my head. You know what I mean? Like a long time ago.
Yes. I think that's so common. Yeah, me too. And it's funny because sometimes those voices have taken on a life of their own. If you went back and actually talked to the person or the people or whatever, they wouldn't say that at all. It's just that we've taken that and like hugged onto it so much to say, okay, this is how I will know if I've grown up. This is how I will know if I'm doing it right. This is how I will know if I'm okay. But then what if where you're feeling led, where your creative drive is taking you, where God is taking you, is in a different direction that's in opposition to that? That's when this becomes a trap, because you get stuck not being able to move forward because you're holding on to this thing that a lot of times we're not even really aware that we're holding on to, which is why we're doing this, right? And so that really takes us into why the security trap is so dangerous. Because getting tangled in that safety net, what we think is a safety net, can actually give us a great excuse to avoid risk, which stifles the freedom to make mistakes and to grow, which is unavoidable for people in general, but certainly unavoidable for creatives and artists. Because if we avoid those mistakes, if we make the possibility of making mistakes, we avoid the growth. And that means that ultimately we are not able to develop our abilities to their fullest, or maybe move beyond whatever we're just naturally good at to things that we've never even considered, that God is waiting for us, that wants to blow our minds and bless all kinds of people. It's just like when we've got one eye on the audience, we get the benefit of avoiding negative criticism if we're just kind of performing to do what they want, but we're missing out on getting to see what we're really capable of and sharing that with others. See, the danger is that what comes easily or wins the approval of others may not necessarily lead us into becoming who we were created to be. And it can impede the development of those skills that we need to make what we were created to make, which leaves us unprepared to do what we were created to do, right? So this is the big be, make, do foundation. In this space of exploring making what you were created to make, we have to understand that calling often requires the development of skills and talents that stretch us. And that can take a long time with regular, boring practice to get there. Like, I remember when I was in high school, I took oboe, basically because nobody else did. And I just felt like that would give me special attention. So I took it, but I never practiced. I hated practicing. I couldn't make a good sound, and I never, ever practiced. And, there was a concert that I went up there, and I broke my reed like within the first minute. When I lifted up the instrument, the reed cracked against the music stand. And so I played the whole concert just pretending I was playing. And the director of the orchestra after the concert said, "Wow, Lisa, that was the best you'd ever played." So regular practice is something that is a commitment that, moves you from not being able to play. That's not fun, but that's an important piece of what you have to do, obviously. And we can go through lots of seasons where it looks like we're not accomplishing anything to the outside.
Right.
Other people. I've certainly been in that space a lot. When you have a new idea that you're working on, that you're working out, that you're developing, and everyone around you is going like, there's 5 people that are involved with what you're doing. Is this going anywhere? And I can't pay attention to the external voices because it just takes a long time being in that space to then be able to grow into what it needs to be. So we have to be comfortable being in these seasons where maybe it looks like we've even just like completely washed out, or we have to sacrifice comfort and success to achieve our goals. But true success and faithfulness can only come through risk, and risk requires learning to accept failure, rejection, and the humility of imperfection as a normal part of life. And that is so hard. We've had here a motto since the very beginning: failure is an option. Mm-hmm. And I have to be reminded of that all the time because it's so easy for me to get sucked into those feelings of failure because it's not producing immediate success. And I know, like, if I did this, this, and this would blossom into something else that would look, quote unquote, more successful, but it's not the thing that I'm really being called to. So it's a real tempter.
Yeah. I think that there is a fear of maybe negative criticism that really, really does prevent artists from like fully exploring their craft or their gift or their art. I see this so much in the music land that I've lived in for so many years. And even currently, like, I fall into this trap. I definitely have a fear of criticism when you're in the studio. I mean, I've been working on this new record for months. I've discussed this before with you and even my band about future tripping. Mm-hmm. This idea of future tripping, and future tripping is basically fear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like this bubble of fear. And I really do think that really does prevent you from taking risk. I think it also prevents you from making really, really good work. You know what I mean? Because at that point, if you're sort of like paralyzed by this fear that people aren't going to like what you're doing, you basically begin to make things that are what everybody else is doing because we live in the trend world. So the trend world is that this music from 2 years ago, genre isn't really relevant anymore. So let's change our genre to sort of fit with this. And my perspective on this, especially with my band Flower Bomb, is like, let's take all the things that influence us and make it our own. And if it has a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, but we don't need to wean all the way over here just because everybody else is doing this type of thing. Right. Because what happens is that, and this might be controversial to say, but it basically borders on plagiarism. because you're basically doing exactly what others are doing because you don't want to take that risk because you have this fear of this negative criticism.
Yeah.
But you're the one that's thinking of the negative criticism.
Yeah.
Again, my friend told me this, okay?
It is nothing you relate to at all.
Nothing I relate to at all.
Yeah, I think of the flip side of that, which I've heard a lot of bands, especially bands who make it, who have a really large following, when they creatively are kind of done with what they've been doing and they need to grow into something else. And then there's that fear of, if we start making something that's different than what our fans wanted, we're going to lose all of our fans. We're going to lose all of our opportunities. Like the whole thing is just going to go away. Like that takes a lot of guts to move into that space.
Yeah.
And that makes me think about Andre 3000 from Outkast. It's just fascinating to see this guy go from major hip hop success to kind of putting that aside so that he can focus on the flute and like really exotic flutes and just sort of playing. And then that leads into jazz and all kinds of other things. But I mean, he received major, I didn't even know if it was criticism. It was more like, what are you doing? Don't do this. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But his attitude was just sort of like, that's not, if I'm not creatively engaged, then I'm out. Like there's no other reason for me to be doing this.
Right.
So it takes a lot of courage, but I also think it takes a connection to your motivation and having a strong sense of your identity and who you are, that you're not looking externally for that sense of validation. But those who've been there know that it's usually those seasons of hardship that force us outside and beyond ourselves to who we need to become.
Yeah, I think this is such a good example of like when God's formation happens, that it does happen through circumstances that maybe we didn't choose ourselves.
Yeah.
And we see this all the time.
Yeah. It's that thing of like, if I had given up at this moment, I never would have seen the fruit. We do have a sense of, I think, fear of insecurity, right? Of things not being okay, that's the end. But rather than seeing those setbacks as an opportunity to learn and grow and be shaped in a new way, which God always does if we ask for God to take whatever circumstance we're in and use it as an opportunity to grow us, to mature us, or help us to be more faithful. He always does. He always does. Just a little sermon for you. There you go.
Thank you for that.
Yes, I know you need it.
It's for my friend.
For your friend. Yes, I know your friend needs that. So, okay. So we've talked about the security trap. We talked about the fact that it's common, it's in the Bible, and it doesn't need to be something that gets us stuck forever. But in order to escape it, we have to look at what's behind it so we can make that mindset shift and untangle ourselves from this so-called safety net. The security trap is filled with those struggling with a tug of war conflict between external messaging and our own inner knowing. Overcommitment to productivity and self-sacrifice can often hide the real motivating fears hiding just below the surface. So we might be subconsciously trapped by fears of stereotypes or the influence of parents or authority figures, or maybe there's even trauma that has to be healed. This is where a disciplined self-knowledge comes in, which is one of our 7 principles in the Soulmakers curriculum. And it's so important because it takes courage to have an honest look at our deeply rooted values. Maybe we've internalized the idea that material success is essential, or maybe we're driven by competition or productivity or self-sufficiency or individualism or whatever it is. Worst of all, in the security trap, we're in danger of being distracted from our call because it makes us think that we're sacrificing our deeper longings for something better, for a good cause. It convinces us that doing for others and productivity is enough. So ask yourself, in the back of your mind, do you find yourself returning to any of these questions? What if others don't see value in what I do? What does it even matter if I make art? Or what will people say if I make this choice? Or what if I do this and I end up being alone and I lose all my fans and I lose all my friends and I lose all my collaborators and I lose all my support? Or what if I'm just being selfish? What if I just want to do this for me? The truth is, these fears don't keep you humble. They keep you from taking appropriate risks, working hard to develop skills and gifts that don't come easily, and doing the soul work to develop discernment for yourself. But overcoming these obstacles are often the very things that shape and mature us into what God created us to be and prepare us for what we're called to do. So what do you think, Dan? Out of all those questions, what do you see the most often?
What I see the most often is, what will people say?
Yeah.
I think for me and my peers and the market that we're in, I think that what will people say is the most distracting one.
Yeah, it's huge.
At the end of the day, you're sort of like giving what you're working on, whether that's a social media post about something that you're doing, playing a show, putting out a single, doing a record, a BTS thing or anything, and there's still a fear of like putting that out and be like, is this even going to do anything? And then another question I ask is like, why do we even have to do this?
Yeah. Are you even doing some of those things for what other people say you should do?
Yeah. I'm always thinking about how do we reinvent the wheel?
Yeah.
But I think what will people say is, that one definitely distracts me.
Yeah. We're all hit by that one. And another one that I hear a lot, I hear it specifically within Christian circles, is like, with so much stuff going on in the world, with so much need, with so many things that I could be doing to help in this cause or the other, why does it even matter if I make art? Like, am I just being selfish by taking this time or spending this money or whatever? And those are great questions to ask, but you have to ask yourself first, where is that message even coming from? Where are you getting the idea that it's selfish to use the gifts that God created you to make, And go back and listen to some previous episodes if you want to think about why it matters that you make art, because it does matter. So yeah, all of these, depending on your personality and where you are and what messages you've absorbed personally, that net can grab you. But it's that safety net. It's wanting to have the safety net of knowing I'm doing the right thing, instead of kind of walking on that high wire without the net and saying, I'm going to take the risk to go where I feel called to go, where my creative impulses are leading me, because I'm secure in who I am as a person in Christ. And so I have the security to take those risks and find out and to grow and develop. So this all requires a mindset shift. So if you go back to the framework we were talking about in the introductory episode, you remember we were talking about that we are not the star of a one-act play or even the hero of the show. We're in Act 4 of God's 5-act narrative, where we're invited to improvise, joyfully focusing on the abundance we can share rather than getting it right in an atmosphere of scarcity. Because we have so much freedom to explore and grow when we trust God's provision. When we don't need to meet somebody else's standards and are only looking to the God who loves us and delights in our use of his gifts, all these gifts that he's given us, we experience a security that we've never known before and a joy of life that was off limits when we were stuck in that security trap. So let's revisit the helpful questions of a biblical framework of call. So instead of getting tied up in all those other questions, we can get into a dance of curiosity and wonder and asking, who is God? What does God love? And how can I align my loves with God's loves? And most specifically to this question, how can I live my life? And what can I do with my creative work now, in my current circumstances, with my gifts and talents, with my motivations, with my interests? How can I use all of that in concert with what God is doing in the world and in anticipation of the fulfillment of God's promises? So I want to encourage you. I revisit this trap all the time. It's so easy for all of us, like Dan and you and I have been talking about, that it's so easy to get distracted by what other people say. So it's common, but that's part of the process. So if you feel like you're in this trap, or you feel like you get stuck in this trap, just try to remind yourself that the process of walking through call and development is slow. It does unfold over time, and there are layers of developing maturity and growth. And honestly, it often leads us into those seasons where we feel unseen and misunderstood and out of sync with what others expect of us. Actually, when you're in that space, you can kind of be happy and know, oh, okay, I'm in this like level up mode where I have the opportunity to grow into the next phase of my call. It's a chance. And I find that the more that I risk relying on God and going into that place, it almost becomes addictive, because you get to the other side and you have a different sensibility and a different sense of yourself and a different sense of what's possible. And you are able to do more, be more of who you were created to be. So just remember, when you're in those spaces where things are not going right, don't seem right, people aren't resonating with what you're doing, or you're feeling condemned in some way because you're not meeting those expectations, that space is not failure. It's spiritual formation. So that's the time to really sink in, really spend time with God, really learn to trust, and keep going. Don't give up. So next time, we're going to dig into the happiness trap. We're going to explore what happens when vocation becomes about living the good life. Now, if what we're talking about is resonating with you, I want you to share it with a friend, leave a review, subscribe, or just come back next time. Thanks for listening.
See you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Be Make Do. If you found value here, the single best way to support is to simply hit follow on your podcast app and leave a quick review and rating. It truly helps other soul makers find our community, and it means the world to us. All links for this episode are in our show notes. See you next time as we break down the happiness trap.